Hi, this is Lou, welcome to my channel, and today's video is all about colour mixing. So this video is part of a series I'm doing that's all about watercolour, and what I'm going to try and do is do every video with a little bit of a chat at the beginning about something to do with watercolour painting, and then there'll be like a pattern to paint after that. So I'm going to start with showing you a really basic colour wheel, just using 3 colours. And then we're going to be using those 3 colours to paint a pattern. You don't have to have the exact same colours that I'm using, but I'll give you some options and some alternatives so you can follow along. So these are the 3 colours I'm going to be using today. I'm not going to be using anything else, just these 3. These happen to be tube paints. They're by Winsor & Newton and they're the Cotman brand. There's no rhyme or reason for me buying them in a tube, apart from I wanted to try them out because I've never really used tube paints before. The reason I picked these 3 colours is because I wanted a set of primary colours that would give me the most options for mixing. So you might think that a red, a blue and a yellow would be the best options, but you'd never be able to mix like a really bright hot pink from red. So you can take red and you can water it down and make it paler, and you get like a soft blush kind of colour, but you won't get like a hot pink. If you try and mix that red with blue, then you can end up with all sorts of different purples, and they can be very nice to work with, but you'll never get anything quite as vibrant as this. So the primary scheme I'm working with is cyan, magenta and yellow. So cyan is a blue, but it's a very bright kind of greenish blue. And then magenta is that like really bright pink, like a fuchsia. So the particular colours I've got here are cerulean blue hue, I've got permanent rose, and I've got cadmium yellow pale hue. But you don't need these particular pigments. So cerulean blue, you could use cobalt blue, you could use Prussian blue, which is kind of on that green side as well, but it's a little bit darker. And the same with the permanent rose. There are lots of different kind of pink colours that you can get. So you can get a colour that's called magenta. You can get alizarin crimson is very similar. Again, it's a little bit darker, a little bit deeper, and that kind of changes the tones of the colours you'll be able to mix with it. So if you give this a go at home, use the colours that you've got. If you've got like a bright pink and a kind of greeny blue and a yellow, then use the closest colours that you've got to that. If you don't, then you can use a red, a blue and a yellow, and you'll still get a really good range of tones. So I'm going to start by making a colour wheel. This is a fairly standard art exercise, and if you've done any kind of art classes before, you've probably done this before. But I'm going to go through it with you, and I'm going to show you kind of how I think about colour and how I get to kind of mix different colours as I'm making it. And then after that, I'm going to make a pattern page on watercolour paper. I'm going to be using this pad. And it's really just going to be lots of simple shapes, but what I'm going to try and do is try and vary the colours as much as possible throughout the painting. So I'm going to have a play with these 3 colours, and I'm going to make a colour wheel. So this is something you can do if you want to, you don't have to. I'm just using it to kind of demonstrate. So I'm going to take some of my yellow. So the paint I squeezed from the tube and put in this palette, and I did that yesterday, so it's had a chance to dry. You can use it straight from the tube if you want, but you don't need to. You can leave it to dry and then add a little bit of water. Paint springs back to life and you can use it. So I'm going to take some yellow and I'm just going to put a blob of this at the top of my page. There we go. Now I'm going to wash my brush because I want to get nice and clean. And I can use my blue, and I'm going to put a blob of that here. And then exactly the same I'm going to do with the magenta. And a blob of that on here. Now the fun comes when you start mixing colours together. So I'm going to start with mixing the magenta and the yellow. So I've got some permanent rose on here. and I'm going to mix some yellow into it. And I want kind of equal amounts of the pink and the yellow. And when I get them nicely balanced, I should get like a nice bright scarlet. I'm going to put that in there. It needs to be a bit stronger. Okay. A bit more in. And then I'm going to do the same with the blue and the yellow. So let's take some yellow, mix it into that blue. Got my originals dirty now. It's a bad habit. And that should give me a nice bright green. And that can go in there. And then you've guessed it, I'm going to do the same with the pink and the blue. And this should give me a nice rich bright blue there. So now we've got 6 colours around the wheel, and what we can do is we can make the colours in between as well. So I can take that blue, add more of the cyan into it, get a colour that's halfway in between the two, and then add more pink into it, get more of a purple. So for this we need a mix that's more pink than yellow, so it's mostly pink and then it's got a little bit of yellow in it. Okay, that's nice. I think this colour's called Persimmon. I like that colour. And then this one is the same thing, but it's more yellow, less pink. Should give us a nice bright orange. Now a green mix, something that's a little bit more on the yellow side. And then something that's a lot more on the blue side. There we go. So we've got lots of colours on here, but this isn't all the colours that there are. If you go back to here, you'll see there's kind of like taupey colours and grey colours and beigey colours and olivey greens and yeah, there's a whole range of different colours that aren't represented in here. So how do we make those? All of those kind of mid-tones we make by mixing 3 colours together. So we can fill in the centre of this wheel. So let's see what happens if we mix an equal quantity of each of the 3 colours, and we'll put that right at the centre. So take some of the blue, some of the pink, and some of the yellow. Mix them all together. And then in here we get this colour that's really neutral and grey. In fact, if you get your pigments balanced exactly, it becomes exactly kind of grey, and then you can make it really deep and make it black. But in between that, there's all these other colours. So we've got our green that's an equal mix of blue and yellow, so that's over here. And then if we add a little bit of pink into it, we get a nice olivey green. So we've got a blue that's an equal mix of the cyan and the magenta. And we just add a little bit of the yellow into it. We get a kind of a dusty, slaty blue. So we've got our red here that's a mix of the magenta and the yellow. And then if we add just a tiny bit of blue into it, we get like a soft plum colour. I think it needs more yellow. There you go. So you can get all these subtle tones by mixing different ratios of these three colours together. So we've got all of our really bright colours around the outside of the circle. And then we can go on and fill in the inside of the circle by mixing in combinations of these really bright colours. So when you're coming to mix colours, if you want to tone down a colour, you find the colour that's opposite it and you mix it in. So I've got some magenta here, and then I need to mix some green into it. So I can take some green that I've mixed, mix it into the magenta, or you can just take a little bit of the cyan, a little bit of the yellow, and you end up with a more subtle version of the same colour. So I've got a really bright pink here, and this is just like a softer, more like a dusty rose pink. So that's how you get to these colours from the really bright ones. You mix in a little bit of the opposite colour. So I'm going to do that again with the cyan. Let's take some of that. What's opposite that is this bright red. I know I made the bright red by mixing the pink and the yellow. So let's take a tiny bit of pink, tiny bit of yellow, and here's a more subtle blue. Same with the yellow. Let's take some of that. What's opposite that? It's a nice true blue. So, tiny bit of the cyan, tiny bit of magenta, mix it in there, and we get a sort of mustardy yellow. So pretty much any colour that you can think of, you can mix from a combination of these three. So you can keep this as a reference if you want. You can label it, and you can label the different colours, and you can label how much of a mix you've put into each of the blobs. So some artists really like colour theory. For others it's a little bit more bewildering. There's a lot of artists who say they don't really think about the colours when they mix them, they just kind of do it instinctively. So sometimes it's come from like learning this kind of theory. Sometimes it's just come from trial experimentation. So if you don't get this, then do not worry about it, because what we're going to do next is just experiment. We're just going to have a little bit of a play, and we're going to play with three colours to start with. So I'm just going to use one brush for this. This is a size 7 round brush. It's a synthetic brush, but it's a good useful size. If you're going to get one brush, then get something like this. It's got enough bristles in here to hold plenty of water and paint, but it comes to a nice point, so you can do kind of fine detailed work with it as well. And then I've got 2 jars of water and I've got a little bit of paper towel. So the pattern that I'm going to do today is I'm just going to draw some random shapes, really simple shapes, some circles, some like rectangle bars, some triangles, little arch shapes. I'm going to draw them fairly neatly and kind of on a grid, but not really. So I'm not going to measure anything out. I'm just going to do it by eye. So I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow, mix it with some water, and I'm going to do a circle. Draw the outline and get a little bit more paint and fill it in. There we go. First one done. So now I'm going to wash my brush, take off the excess water on the side of the jar, and then I'm going to do the same with this pinky colour. And then let's make a shape with it. So let's see, I'm going to do a half circle, so I'll need a straight line on one side and then like a half circle shape on the other. So do the outline and then I can fill it all in. And you can use the tip of the brush to refine the shape if you want, if you're not happy with it. Right, and now the blue. Let's do another half circle, but this time we'll have the flat side here. The round side there. So now I want to start mixing my colours together. So I've already got this blue on my brush, so I can just take that and mix it in to the yellow that I've got on the palette there. And that should give me a nice green. It might need a little bit more yellow, a bit more water. I'm going to paint here, and I'm going to paint like a rectangle. I'm leaving a good gap in between all of my shapes for this pattern, so I don't have to worry about any of the colours running or anything like that. Okay, so we've got a green that we mixed from the cyan colour and the yellow. So clean my brush and I can make another mix. So let's take some of the yellow and mix it into the pink. And this will give you either, depending on how much of the pink or the yellow that you put in, a peach colour or an orange colour, or like a bright red. So that's quite a nice orange. I'm going to wash my brush and get a little bit more of the magenta in there. See if we can get something closer to a red. And that's quite nice. A little bit more water. And I can paint a shape with this. So I'm going to go for another circle here. And we've got one final mix to make, and that is to add the magenta into the blue. So let's do that. Wash my brush. Add a bit more blue in there. There we go, we've got kind of like a nice indigo colour. So I think it's time to turn the page and make a shape along here. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to do a straight line. That's the width of those three shapes. And then I think I'm going to do some scallops. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I can go back to my colour in the palette and pick up some more paint to fill in those shapes because I feel my brush starting to get a little bit dry. There we go. So we've got various different mixes here that we can still make with two colours. So I can take this indigo and move it much more towards either the magenta or the cyan. So let's wash my brush, pick one to get some more magenta in there. So I'm going to make a little thin rectangle along here, draw the edges in, and then use the point of my brush to square the corners off and make the edge nice and neat. Similarly, I can take this red and make it much more yellowy orange by adding more yellow into it, maybe even more. And then let's make a shape in here. There. And then what I fancy doing is just changing that colour a little bit, adding more magenta into it, and then drawing a little circle right next to that so the two colours blend together in the join. So now another colour that's between the yellow and the blue, and if I add a lot more blue into it, we get more of like a sea green colour. And I'm going to use that here. What shall I do with it? I know. I'm going to make like an arch. And then I can modify that colour a little bit, make it more greeny, and do a little bit in the centre. So here's a whole variety of shapes that we can make on the page and colours that we can make by mixing two of these colours together. We can get more interesting colours again by mixing a third colour into each of these. So we've got this green here that we've mixed from the yellow and the blue, but we can mute it down just a little bit by adding just a tiny bit of the magenta. And now rather than having a really bright limey green, we've got a much softer tone. So let's do a line along here and make it into a half circle. Now I think this is looking a bit pale, so I'm going to mix up some more of this same colour. So that's a fair bit of yellow. A little bit of blue. and then just dipping my clean brush into the magenta just the tiniest bit. So I'm happy with this tone now. I can go in and complete this shape. So I'm going to put one next to it. I'm going to use a very similar colour. I'm just going to add more blue into it. Tiny bit more magenta. So here we've got this purple that was made from the magenta and the cyan blue, and I can dull that down just a tiny bit in the same way by taking a little bit of the yellow and mixing it in there. And that just gives me a really lovely kind of soft plum colour. Let's do a line down here. And then add some more scallops onto there. Slightly bigger ones this time. 3, 4. And then we'll fill those in. And again, I can take my brush and refine the shapes if I want to. So we've got this red that was made from the magenta and the yellow, and again I can dull that down by adding just the tiniest bit of the cyan blue. And these colours to me are much more interesting than the primaries and the brights. I love these colours. It's like dusty pink. It's beautiful. Alright, let's see. I'm going to draw a line that follows these scallops. 2, 3, 4. Let's make it a little bit wider. 1. Let's fill that in. 2. 3, 4. So I'm just going to keep going until my page is full, and yeah, I'll leave a little bit of a margin around the edge, but I'm not measuring it, I'm just going to eyeball it. So now I've filled my entire page with shapes, and you'll see that some of the colours are really bright and vibrant, and then other ones are much more subtle and muted. And you can mix pretty much any colour you fancy from these three colours. So it's really fun to have a great big palette of lots of different colours and lots of different pigments, and it's a lot quicker to mix paints like that, definitely. But you don't have to be restricted by how many colours you've got. If you've got just three or a small number of colours like that, then you can mix pretty much anything that you can think of. So thanks very much for watching today. I really hope that you've enjoyed this. If you did, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos from me, then please do subscribe to the channel. If you've got any questions or comments, then I'd love to hear them. And I always love to see the work that you make. So if you post it on social media, on Instagram or anything, if you tag me at Lou Rachel Davis, then I will see them and I'll share them in my stories if I can as well. So thanks very much for watching today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!